You're listening to the Harmony of We, a space for remembering what we already are together. I'm Greg Kuiper, counselor, author, and fellow traveler in this ongoing field of being human. This podcast isn't about fixing. It's not about getting relationships right. It's about coming into resonance with yourself, with each other, and with the presence that lives in between. This is where the book Relationship, the Harmony of We continues, in breath, in story, and in shared awareness. Welcome. I'm so glad we could be together today. Before we get started, let's take a moment to relax together and just settle into this experience that we're about to have. If you wish, close your eyes and please exhale and take in a deep, long breath. Let it out slowly and deeply. Exhale all the way. And then do it again. Hold it and then let it out slowly. Keep breathing like that. And as you breathe in, notice your feet on the floor. Notice where you're sitting. Turn your attention to your body and what you feel, the sensations. Keep breathing. Ask your mind to be still, and it will. For just a few minutes that we're together today, and we find peace in this presence together. Breathe in. A long exhale. Relaxing your shoulders, sinking into your seat, finding the peace. And when you're ready, come back to where we are. Relaxed and in presence together. This is the we, right here. No matter where you are, no matter what the distance, no matter our locations, we are now energetically in the we. It is that simple. In our last episode, we talked about emotional awareness, about how learning to recognize what we're actually feeling can interrupt the relational autopilot, about how that small moment of noticing can shift the direction of a conversation. But emotional awareness alone isn't always enough. Because even when we know what we're feeling, we don't always feel safe enough to share it. We might recognize the hurt or the fear or the longing, and still something holds back. The words stay inside. And that's what today's episode is about. Safety. Not physical safety, relational safety. The kind that allows vulnerability to emerge naturally. We often hear that vulnerability is important. Books talk about it. Therapists encourage it. Partners ask for it. Just be vulnerable. Let me in. But vulnerability cannot be forced. You can't demand it. You can't command it. You cannot reason your way into it. because vulnerability is not simply a behavior. It's not something we perform on cue. It's a state of openness that the body either allows or protects against. I love Brené Brown's work, especially around shame and vulnerability. And she describes vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And when you think about it that way, it begins to make sense why vulnerability can feel so difficult. To be vulnerable is to say something that matters without knowing how it's going to be received. It's saying, I'm hurt. I miss you. I'm scared this relationship might not work. Or I need you. Those moments carry risk of misunderstanding, risk of dismissal or of not being met. And because those risks exist, vulnerability is never just a choice of the mind. It's a response of the nervous system. A nervous system that has spent years learning when it is safe to soften and when it is safer to protect, when it is safe to open, and when it is wiser to close. And that system is always paying attention, always scanning, not through conscious thought, but through subtle signals, tone of voice, facial expression, the timing of a response, even silence. All of it registers and all of it matters. And underneath that constant scanning, the nervous system is always asking a quiet question. Is it safe to be real here? And sometimes vulnerability appears in very small moments. Imagine someone sitting across from their partner at the kitchen table. They've been quiet most of the evening. Finally, one says softly, I've been feeling a little distance from you lately. There's a pause in the room because what they've just shared isn't a complaint. It's not an argument. It's something much more exposed. They've revealed something tender, something uncertain, and now the space between them holds a question. Will this feeling be received or protected against? Because in moments like this, vulnerability is standing quietly in the room, waiting to see what the relationship will do with it. And what determines whether vulnerability stays open or quickly retreats is something very simple: safety. Most of us began learning about safety long before we understood relationships. We learned it through tone, through facial expression, through how people responded when we cried or spoke, or when we made mistakes. If someone met our emotions with patience, our nervous system learned something important. Emotion can exist here. I can feel this here. But if our emotions were dismissed or ignored or met with frustration, our systems learned something else. Be careful here. Not going to show this to this person. And this is not a conscious choice. It's a learned response. Over time, those experiences become patterns, invisible expectations we carry into adult relationships. Expectations about what will happen if we speak honestly. Expectations about whether our emotions will be welcomed or pushed away. And often we don't even realize they're there. They live quietly beneath our reactions, in the hesitation before we share something vulnerable, in the way we brace ourselves when a conversation becomes emotional, in the small protective moves we make without even thinking. And because these patterns live in the nervous system, not just the mind, they follow us into every relationship we enter, which is why safety becomes so important. Because when the nervous system senses safety, those old protective patterns begin to loosen and vulnerability slowly begins to return. Safety in relationship doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean conflict disappears. It doesn't mean everything feels easy. Safety means something quieter. It means my inner experience can exist here without being attacked, dismissed, or controlled. It means the nervous system senses I can be real here. I can be authentic. I can be genuine without needing to defend, without needing to perform, without needing to hide, without needing to choose my words carefully, without needing to tread softly. The eggshells disappear. And when that happens, something remarkable begins to unfold. Vulnerability appears. Not dramatically, not as performance, just honestly. Our bodies are constantly scanning for cues of safety and threat, not consciously, but automatically. Long before we form a thought about what's happening, the nervous system is already responding. It's reading the environment, reading the people around us, tone of voice, facial expression, pacing of words, eye contact, even silence. The nervous system registers all of it. Tiny signals, subtle shifts, a raised eyebrow, a long pause after something vulnerable is said, a voice that becomes sharper or softer. All of it becomes information. The body is always asking a quiet question. Is this safe or should I protect myself? And most of the time, this happens faster than we can think. You may have heard the phrase reading the room, right? That's the nervous system at work, sensing the emotional atmosphere before a single word is analyzed. When safety is present, the body begins to soften. Breathing slows, shoulders drop, the muscles in the face relax, the voice becomes more open, and something else begins to happen. The emotions that were held back start to rise. Not dramatically, not all at once, just honestly. A little more truth, a little more openness, a little more willingness to be seen. Because when the nervous system senses safety, it no longer needs to protect as much. And that's when vulnerability has a chance to appear. Let's return to the couple we met in the last episode. Remember, they're sitting around in the living room. Well, they're sitting together again. The tension from earlier in the week is still lingering. She says quietly, there's something I've been wanting to say. He's looking at his phone. Okay. She hesitates. Already something inside her is tightening. Her nervous system is watching. Is this safe? She continues anyway. I've been feeling a little alone lately. His response comes quickly. I thought we already talked about that. Her shoulders drop slightly, and in that moment, something closes. Not dramatically, just subtly. What she was about to say next, she keeps to herself. The vulnerability retreats, not because she's unwilling. It's not about choice. It's about safety. The space between them, the we, didn't feel safe enough. Now, imagine the same moment unfolding differently. She says, I've been feeling a little alone lately. This time he looks up. He puts his phone down. He really looks at her. And instead of defending or explaining, he pauses and then says, I didn't realize that. Tell me more. The words themselves aren't magical. What matters is the presence behind them, curiosity, attention, openness. And suddenly the space shifts. She exhales, her body softens, and she says something deeper. I think I just miss feeling close to you. That's vulnerability. And it appeared not because she forced it, but because the space between them allowed it. Safety in relationships is not something one person provides for the other. It's something that emerges between two nervous systems, a shared environment, a relational atmosphere. And it grows through small signals, listening without interruption, softening the tone, staying present when emotion appears, resisting the urge to fix immediately, and sometimes simply just saying, I'm here. Not to solve, not to fix, just to stay and be. Presence. Sometimes the closing of vulnerability is almost invisible. Two people are sitting together after a long day. One of them finally says something they've been holding inside them. I feel like I'm disappointing you lately. The words land softly. There's uncertainty in them, a quiet hope to be understood. The other person responds quickly. Why would you think that? I've never said that. On the surface, nothing seems wrong. No yelling, no criticism, but something subtle just happened. The response moved away from the feeling and into correction. And the nervous system notices. The person who spoke first nods slightly. Yeah, maybe I'm just overthinking. But what actually happened is this. A vulnerable moment opened. It was right there. And then it closed. Not because either person meant harm, not because the emotional signal wasn't received. And this happens in relationships all the time. Small openings, small closures. Tiny moments where the nervous system decides it might not, it might be safer not to go here. This is why safety matters so much in relationships. Because vulnerability isn't something we push ourselves into. It's something that appears when the nervous system senses it can stay open. Vulnerability appears when the nervous system senses it can stay open. Take a moment. Think about someone in your life, someone you feel safe with. Picture sitting with them, maybe over coffee, maybe in a quiet room, or maybe just out walking together. As you think about them, notice what happens in your body when you imagine this. Is there ease, openness, a sense that you could say what's really on your mind? Now imagine someone where safety feels more fragile, when you're not sure what to expect. What changes in your body now as you think about them? Does your breathing shift? Do you begin choosing your words more carefully? Your nervous system already knows the difference. And that awareness alone can teach us a great deal about connection. Healing doesn't come from forcing vulnerability. Healing comes from cultivating safety, from creating a space where the nervous system no longer feels the need to guard every word or emotion. When safety grows, truth begins to emerge. Emotion surfaces, not as an outburst, but as something honest that was waiting to be heard. Understanding deepens, defensiveness softens, and the relational field between two people begins to shift. A little more openness, a little more curiosity, a little more room for each person to be real, not because anyone forced it, not because the right technique was used, but because the conditions finally allowed it, because the space between them became safe enough for something true to appear. And perhaps this is why vulnerability requires so much courage, not because it is dramatic, but because it asks us to reveal something real before we know how it will be received. Brene Brown often describes vulnerability as the birthplace of connection. But what makes that possible is not simply the willingness to open, it's the presence of someone who can meet that openness with care, someone who pauses, someone who listens, someone who allows the moment to be real without rushing past it. Because when vulnerability is met with presence, something powerful happens. The nervous system softens, the body relaxes, and the space between two people begins to change. What was guarded becomes honest. What was distant becomes human, and slowly connection begins to grow again. Not through effort, not through perfect communication, but through the quiet courage of being real and the safety of being met there. Think for a moment about a time when you were with someone and the space between you felt safe. Maybe it was a partner, a close friend, a therapist, even a brief conversation with someone who simply knew how to listen. Notice what that felt like, how your body responded. Did your shoulders soften? Did your breathing slow a little? Was it easier to say what you were actually feeling? Moments like that have a certain quality to them, a sense of openness, a sense that you don't have to guard every word. And when that happens, something begins to form between two people, a kind of coherence, a shared steadiness. This is what I mean when I talk about tending the we. Because the we in a relationship isn't just built through words or agreements, it grows through moments of safety. Moments where two nervous systems recognize that they can rest and be real together. Safety is quiet. It's rarely dramatic. Often it's simply the experience of someone staying present long enough for your nervous system to soften. A steady voice, a patient pause, a moment where you realize, I don't have to protect myself here. And in that moment, something real can finally be spoken. In the next episode, we'll explore a word that describes what becomes possible in that softened space: attunement, the quiet art of meeting another human being exactly where they are, not fixing, not correcting, simply sensing and responding to the life unfolding in front of you. Until then, notice where safety lives in your relationships, and notice where your presence helps create it. See you next time.